Welcome to tonight's webinar, Tips for Racing Your First Full or Half Ironman Triathlon with David Glover and Krista Schultz. And even though a lot of these tips will be focused on your first race, they can also be applied and should be applied to your second, third, or even 20th. Just do some quick introductions. So I'm David, and I'd like to introduce Krista really quickly. So Krista went to her undergrad at University of New Orleans, where she majored in exercise physiology, and she also ran Division I cross country. She went on to Goucher College and got her master's in athletic administration. As a triathlete, she has competed for more than 10 years. She's qualified for Hawaii and raced there, and she was second in her age group at the inaugural Ironman China. She's represented the state of Maryland for the Best of the U.S. Amateur Triathlete competition from 2006 to 2008. As a coach and trainer, she's worked with hundreds of athletes and as well as professional teams like the Baltimore Ravens, Baltimore Orioles, and New Orleans Brass. Most recently, she's a founder of She Does Try, which is dedicated to helping women build confidence through the sport of triathlon.
Thanks, David. I'm going to introduce David quickly. David is a cancer survivor. He actually has a book he wrote called Full Time and Sub 9 about racing iron distance triathlon and his journey through fighting cancer, battling cancer. And he has competed in 28 iron distance triathlons with a PR of 8 hours and 51 minutes. He has also competed in Ironman Hawaii World Championships and was inducted in the Vineman Hall of Fame. And he's won 5 iron distance events overall. He's a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy. He holds 2 master's degrees, one in engineering management and the other in exercise physiology. And he's also the founder of the School of Tri and race director for the Luray Triathlons.
Thank you, Krista. So I think this is why we're all here tonight. It's all about achieving the dream or your dream. And I like to use this quote a lot. The ability to conquer oneself is no doubt the most precious of all things sports bestows upon us. And that was said by a 2-time Olympian. And it's really important to remember it's when you're out there, and if I could summarize Ironman racing or even half Ironman racing, even though you're out there with maybe 1,000, 1,500, even some races 2,500 athletes, you're really racing against yourself. And your race preparation, even if your race is in November or December this year, your race preparation starts months and months in advance, and sometimes even years if you're just getting into the sport and deciding whether or not to make that leap. So the goal here tonight is really to give you some practical tips, geared towards if you're doing your first half or full Ironman, but also tips that can be applied as you get more experience as well, so that you can achieve your dream at the finish line. So when we talk about race day, it's really important to start with training. So, for most athletes, doing a half or full Ironman, you might start training 6 months in advance, maybe even you're training year-round with a short off-season. So let's talk a little bit about what that looks like and how to make the most out of it. And it really starts with setting goals and developing a plan. And your goals, can be as simple as I want to do my first half Ironman or Ironman, or for myself, when I have been in the sport for a while and I started getting some good results, I'm like, wow, I want to break 10 hours, and at one point it's like I want to break 9.5, I want to break 9. So it might be a time goal, it might be a placing goal, it might be I want to qualify for the half Ironman World Championships or Ironman Championships. But it's really important to define what those goals are. And, if you're just starting out, it may be simply to finish, and write them down. And then your plan essentially becomes those stepping stones to get you there. And that part of that plan is the training. And if you're interested in training plans and just to get a feel for what one may look like, a structured plan, we do have those at enduranceworks.net /training plans. So it's important to have this plan in place, and I know for myself as an athlete, I've gone from working with a coach one-on-one to writing my own training plans to just winging it, and at different levels of success. So even winging it, there's still sort of an overall plan of, okay, this is what I need to do each week, without necessarily formalizing. So again, it's important to have that picture and where you want to get to. Put in the time for the training. And we had a couple questions about how much time each week do you need to train for half or full. And if you're starting 6 months out, it might only be 6-8 hours a week. But as you sort of get into that 2 to 3 months before, you're typically looking for about 12 to 15 hours a week for a half Ironman and 15 to 18 for a full. And there's always going to be exceptions to that on either side. Living in Boulder, we see a lot of the pro triathletes. They're swimming 5 days a week, biking 5 days a week, running 4 days a week, strength training. So they're easily putting in 25 hours. It's not practical for most of us that have regular jobs. On the low side, I've worked with an athlete who, because of his job, had limited training time during the week. So he trained at most 11 or 12 hours per week for an Ironman and had good results. So just to give you a ballpark. And, two components we always think about: swim, bike, and run. But strength is an important component. Developing your core, your stability, your balance. And we've got actually a great webinar we did a few weeks ago on that if you go to schooloftri.com. And then finally, rest. There's a great quote. I'm probably going to say it wrong, but you don't get fit exercising, you get fit resting on the couch. So when you go out and exercise, you're stressing your body, you're breaking it down. You go out and do a hard run, you're actually destroying muscle cells, and so your body has to repair and recover, and it does that through rest and especially through sleep. And one of the most important things you can do now, or at least as soon as it's available, is review the athlete guide. If this is a copy of the cover for the one for Ironman 70.3 Raleigh next year or last year, it's sort of going to be your Bible for the race. And if you don't have one from this year, if you can get one from last year, because it's really going to drive, in some ways, your plan, the type of training you're going to do. So depending on the course, if you're doing an ocean swim versus a lake swim, a mass start versus a time trial start or a wave start, if your course is going to be hilly, you're going to want to train on like hills, or at least try to simulate those hills indoors on a trainer or a spinning bike. So there's a lot of things that if you haven't done a half or full before that are going to be different. For example, the rules are going to be slightly different. So Ironman rules, sometimes they use drafting tents. So if you get caught drafting, you have to actually pull over by the side of the road in a tent that's set up for this and hang out for 4 minutes, whatever the time is. There's going to be gear bags, so we'll talk about those a little bit later. You don't necessarily have a transition area per se. Typically you'll have a transition tent. So we'll talk about what that looks like and what that means. A lot of times, if you could do a lot of local races, depending on where you live, you can register the day before, or maybe even check in the morning of, rack your bike. A lot of these longer races, you have to rack your bike a day before, sometimes even 2 days before. And what's going to be on the course? What kind of support is available in terms of aid stations? One big difference between these longer races is you're going to have aid stations both on the bike and the run. So it's important to know how frequent they are and what they're going to have there, because that's going to sort of bake into your overall plan. If Raleigh, for example, has the Iron Bar Ironman performance drink, that's something you can train with now to see if that works for you. If it doesn't work for you, then you have to figure out another way to, drink during the race without relying with what's on the course. So again, it's sort of your Bible for what you're doing, and the sooner you can kind of look at it, get an idea for what's there, you can better prepare yourself. Yeah, I touched a little bit on this already, but it's important to break down and plan for that specific course. So each course is a little bit different. Whether if you're racing at Ironman Florida, it's pancake flat, except for going over the overpasses. But there's wind. If you're racing in up in Canada, Lake Placid, Coeur d'Alene, they're pretty hilly bike courses. Run courses. Some runs might be out and back, one loop. Others might be multiple loops. So what's the course look like? And there's this principle in training called this principle of specificity that basically states your body adapts to the demands placed on it. So if you're going to be racing a hilly Ironman or half Ironman, it's important to practice on hills. And I would argue you should practice on hills anyways, because they're going to make you a stronger cyclist and runner.
Yeah, also, I just want to add quickly is if you do own a CompuTrainer, you can download a lot of times the bike course and simulate it on the CompuTrainer. And just to note, the CompuTrainer I think is a lot more challenging than doing the course outdoors, but at least it gives you an idea of the terrain, and you can sort of practice that indoors a little bit.
Okay, plan for and practice race day logistics. So if you've read the guide, you kind of got an idea of what's available on the course, and what I mean by plan for and practice race day logistics is what to wear, what to eat, what to drink, what to carry. And I downloaded this picture off the internet. Looks like Hawaii with the lava in the background. But as you can see, this athlete, they're decked out, so it's hot conditions, so they're wearing light-colored racing kit, so that's perfect. Looks like they have arm coolers on, so those are sort of the opposite of arm warmers in the idea if you keep them wet, they'll help cool you. You can see they have an aero bottle up front. You can see the straw sticking up. So that's, aero bottles are great because you can typically just dump, you pick up a water bottle from the aid station or a sports drink, you can just dump it in the top, and then your drink's right in front of you. So it's easy to just dip your head down and take a sip rather than trying to reach down into your frame or behind you. If you notice this, it looks like this athlete also has some type of water down on their frame as well as behind them as well. So whatever you use, and it's important to practice your setup in training. I've always kind of gone with the philosophy of train heavy, race light. So when you go out training, if I was going out for anything more than probably a 3-hour ride, I'd probably carry 4 bottles with me. A air bottle up front, 1 on the frame, and then 2 on the back, just to minimize stops. On race day, you don't necessarily need to carry that much, but you may want to have extra space. For example, maybe you don't put a bottle behind the seat, but you have a cage there so you can grab a bottle from the aid station and stick it there if you don't need it right away. Other things, on the right side of the screen, there's a bento box. These things are great. You can see it's just a little nylon box, and it's got a mesh. Typically, they have a mesh top, but that's what you can put that right behind your headset and on the top tube, and that's a great way to just store stuff like gel. When I used to race, I used to like gummy bears, so I have my little bag of gummy bears. If you're using, racing Hawaii, and you think you need extra sodium, you can put a little, container with your salt capsules there, etc.
So number one mistake people make in triathlon, especially Ironman, is that they will do something new on race day that they haven't practiced. We have a friend, actually, David coached him for quite a while, and kind of a funny guy, and he's racing Hawaii and really well trained, ready for the race. After the race, talking to us, he said, "Well, I had a terrible race." So what happened? Oh, the day before, there were these great shoes I saw at the expo, and someone sold them to me. I tried them out. They hurt my feet. My feet were all messed up, so I had to walk on the run. Um, Hydration, nutrition. There was some other stuff my friend was using that said it really worked for him, so I wanted to use it. And I hadn't trained with any of this stuff, so to upset his stomach. Um, and just went out too hard. Things that he did on race day that he didn't train and practice doing totally screwed his race up. So spent a lot of money to get there and did a lot of training and all went out the door. So whenever I talk to a group of people too, I say, there's going to be somebody in this room, no matter how many times I say it, do not do anything new on race day.
And one thing to think about, if you kind of get a feel for what's available on the course, I'll give you an example. I did Coeur d'Alene in 2010. I didn't want to use that sports drink. So what I did is I carried some concentrated bottles on my bike, and then I would, take in, a sip of that with water to dilute it. So I was able to use that through the first half of the bike without picking up any sports drink from the course. I just picked up water. And then at the halfway point, I used the special needs bags, which are the bags you'll get, typically you only see this at full Ironman, but it's a bag you can put in stuff for the bike that you may want to pick up halfway, and there's also another bag for the run. And so what I did is I had 2 bottles of my concentrated sports drink. I put them in the special needs bag so I could pick them up the halfway point, and basically it got me through the second half of the bike. But again, this is all stuff practice ahead of time, and have a plan going into race day. So kind of talked about getting up to the race, and for me the race always really starts on race week, and because there's not a whole lot you can do to help yourself on race week with training, but there are a lot of things you can do to hurt yourself. So we'll talk about both of these, and number one, and this goes back to the athlete guide as well, is look at the timeline for the week, especially for, this is an example of, I pulled this out of the Raleigh schedule, and I simplified it a little bit, but it's a Sunday race, and so backing up from there, you can see you can check in Friday or Saturday. Saturday between 10 and 6, you have to check your bike in. And there's athlete briefings. Sometimes these are mandatory, so you may have to go for that. So it's important to kind of have an idea of what some of these things are. For a lot of the bigger Ironman races, they'll actually have you check in by Friday, so you may be able to check in, say, as early as Wednesday. So it's important to plan ahead so you get there enough time. I have known people that have missed the registration, and the couple that I've seen, they've made exceptions, but it may not always be the case. In the morning, Sunday morning, starting at 4, so again, it's going to be an early morning, so you got to plan ahead. Run gear check-in, so we'll talk a little bit more about the bags a little bit later on. Shuttle bus service, so in this case you have to catch a bus to the start. Other races you probably don't have to be there that early, so again, just look at each race is going to be a little bit different. They tend to have the same look and feel, but there's always some variation depending on the race itself and the venue. Double check your gear list. I just pulled this off the USA Triathlon website. You can download it, and this may not be the full list for an Ironman or a full or a half, but at least give you a starting point. Check. What I like to do is start if I'm traveling to a race. So if I live in Boulder now, if I was going to travel to Coeur d'Alene and fly there, I would start laying out my gear, Monday of the week. So I kind of went through, double checked everything, and before I packed and flew up there, say on Wednesday. Race bags. These are, if you've never done an Ironman, These can be confusing. Typically, you'll get 5 bags, and I'll go through them. So starting in the lower right corner, that's your morning clothes bag. So what's going to happen is you'll show up on race morning, and you're going to be in your it might be cool, so you're in your sweats and your comfortable shoes, and right before you go down to the starting line to get in the swim, you're going to take off all that clothing. So the morning clothes bag is basically everything you're going to stuff in there. And the one thing I would say with any of these, don't put anything valuable or potentially breakable, except maybe sunglasses for the bike and the run, because these things can get ripped open, and sometimes they will get piled on top of other bags. So the next two are the blue bike gear bag and the red run gear. So rather than have a transition spot per se, your bike will be racked, but you're not going to have like your little towel set up with all your gear laid out. Instead, you're going to have a bag for your bike. So this is basically when you exit the swim, you're going to run out, and we'll show you a picture later on. You're going to run down a row of bags. You're going to grab your bag, and you're going to run into a changing tent. And in that changing tent, you're essentially going to pull off all your swim stuff. They'll typically have folding chairs, and dump out your bike stuff, put your swim stuff in the bag, and then put on your bike gear. And then as you exit the changing tent, you'll drop off the bag with your swim gear. Typically, there's volunteers in there, and they'll help you, put stuff in your bag and stuff. If you come into the changing tent, it's really crowded. You may not have that help, so you may have to do it yourself. So just something to think about. Run gear is similar type deal. In this case, what happens for a lot of the big races is you'll finish the bike as you cross the dismount line. Some races, well, there'll actually be people that take your bike and they'll rack it for you. So they'll take your bike, you'll run down the row of bags for your run gear, run into the changing tent, and this time you're taking off your bike gear and putting on your run gear. And same thing, as you exit the tent, they'll typically have a place where you'll toss that bag. So those are, you're going to use those bags for sure, the blue and the red, because you're going to have gear to put in. You're going to have to look at the directions for the bike. So sometimes they won't allow you to leave your bike shoes clipped in on your bike. You have to put them in your bag. Sometimes you can leave your helmet on your bike, or sometimes you have to put it in the bag. So this is stuff you want to look at. The two that may be new, I touched on a little bit briefly before, are the special needs. And these are typically available for you at the halfway point. When I did Coeur d'Alene in 2010, right about the halfway point, they had all these bags lined up in numbers, and you basically pulled over to the side. They handed me my bag. I stuffed in my old empty bottles, and I pulled out my full bottles and a gel flask as well. Run, sometimes you might have if you have access to it, you'll have access to it at least once. Sometimes you can get access to it multiple times depending on the shape of the course. Same thing, is there stuff you need on the run? For example, if you expect to finish later at night, they want you to have reflective, tape. It may get cooler at night, so maybe a light jacket. Any extra nutrition, things, if you like Cliff blocks and they don't have them on the course, you can put those there too. The thing with these is they're not required, and sometimes I don't use them, sometimes I do, but they're nice to use as a backup, and I always like to put something in them, even if I don't end up using it, because it's there. And if I'm doing the race, and for example, I've launched water bottles off the back of my water bottle cage, or I've dropped my gel flask, I know there's at least a backup in my special needs. The one downside is a lot of times you don't get the stuff back, so either the bags get thrown away or they just get all mixed up. So just something to think about. Typically for the bigger races, the halves and the fulls, they'll have practice swims, at least a day before, sometimes 2 or 3 days before. great way to reduce anxiety and just get comfortable with the water, how it feels, the temperature, especially if you're doing an ocean swim. If you haven't been swimming in the ocean, just to get out there and just get comfortable. I also find it helps to kind of get the perspective from the water of what things look like. So, what's the start going to be like? Which direction are you going? Is the sun going to be in your eyes? So, if you do it in the morning, right around the time when you normally start the race, you'll kind of get a good feel for, okay, this is what it's going to be like. It's also a way to look for landmarks and say, okay, this is what I'm going to see at this point. Here's all these buoys that are lined up. This is what I'm looking for the swim exit. So it's if you have the opportunity, definitely do these. And if you have questions about the course, there's typically race staff there that'll help you with questions. I always like to say, drive the bike course, ride the run course. Especially if you're doing an Ironman, you really don't want to go out and bike 112 miles the Wednesday before the race, but maybe, you go out and bike the 26-mile run course. Driving the bike course and, either driving or riding the run course are helpful if you've never been at the venue to give you an idea. So if I'm looking at this picture from Ironman 70.3 Raleigh, it looks like a lot of straight sections, but there's potentially some sharp turns. It would be nice to get out there, preview those to see, okay, is there gravel on the road? How sharp are they? Are they stop signs? Or, just to be aware. And so when you do get out and do the race, you kind of, okay, I know where I am, or I know what to expect. It helps a lot with anxiety, and it also will help as well if you kind of have an idea where the aid stations are going to be, where the hills are, and you can see what they're actually like and say, oh, okay, that's not as bad as I thought, or maybe, wow, that's a little bit longer than I thought it would be.
Yeah, and keep in mind the day before the race, you want to stay off your feet and rest. So if you don't have time to do a lot of stuff like, drive the whole bike course or part of it or certain things, it's more important to get rested, and you can always refer to the maps, race course maps, in your athlete guide.
Yep. And the question, I think I may have answered it, but does the helmet go into the bike gear bag or with your bike? I think a lot of times they'll tell you it can or can't go on the bike, and then it's whatever you're comfortable with. Sometimes I almost say it's better to put it in the bag because then it's there in one place. The problem with putting it on your bike, if people get to your bike rack before you and pull out their bike and maybe you knock your helmet down. So the last thing you want to do is be messy for your helmet. But yeah, it's a lot of times they'll specify one way or the other, and then after that it's really your preference. So same thing as a swim. You want to preview the transition area. This is from the challenge race in Roth, Germany. At the time, it may still be the biggest Ironman in terms of number of people because they had like over, I think, 3,000 individuals and like another 600 relays. So just massive race. So it's really important. And these are the bike racks. So they basically you put your front wheel in the slots. So looks like 6 to a rack, and those you can't see the numbers, but on the other side of the cards are all numbers. So it's kind of good to get a feel for where your bike is. You can see the changing tent in the tents in the back left corner. There's portable toilets. That's good to know. Typically, you'll have 2 changing tents, one for the men, one for the women, and just get a feel. So if the swim actually is coming in from exit, the swim exit is on the left, off to the left side of the screen. So you're coming across and running from left to right across this picture, and then the bike goes out the right, and then it's the reverse coming in. So you're exiting the swim, you're going to run it, you're going to grab your dip bag. It would be sort of near where those portable toilets are, go into the changing tent, come out, grab your, run across, grab your bike, and then head out. Run, you're coming back in, you're going to drop off your bike, you're going to run, grab the run bags, which are going to be probably by the, if I remember correctly, by the portable toilets in the background, and then go into the changing tent, change, and then head out on the run. So it's a good idea just to kind of get what that flow looks like. I mean, typically you'll flow across the transition area, so it really doesn't matter necessarily, what side you're on, because you're going to end up running it or walking your bike, running your bike the same distance anyways. And finally, stay off your feet as much as possible race week. Um, Triathletes, when they get together, they like to get together, talk about the race, talk about their training. Um, you know, do that, but don't walk around and do that. So, if you got to go to the expo, go to the expo, get your spare tires, your CO2, that another helpful tip, if you're flying, if you're using CO2 cartridges, which I recommend, you can't fly with them. So that's one of the things you'll probably want to pick up at the expo or like a local bike store, and so you have them on race day, because even though there is bike support out there, if it's a 56 or 112 mile course, chances are they're not going to be there when you need them, and you may have to wait. So it's a good idea to have that stuff, or be able to change flats on your own. So here I am hanging out in a hammock. This was in Roth, and we were staying with a German family. But rest and relax. You've done all the training, so do the little training that you need to do to taper, but relax as much as possible.
Yeah, it's better to underdo it those couple days leading up to the race than overdo it. So if you have any question, like a friend of yours is riding the whole course, or not the whole course, but half the course, or just doing a lot of volume and your body's not used to that, even if they do well with that and that's in their program, just keep in mind, it's better to do a little less than more so you don't mess up your whole entire race.
Yeah, and a lot of the big races will have these really nice expos, a lot of cool stuff. It's easy to just hang out and talk to all the vendors. Um, don't, unless you really need something. So that sort of gets us to race day and race morning. And it's another great quote: the body is much stronger than you know. It is the mind that is weakness. So we'll talk a little bit about that aspect of it as well, because you can do all the preparation and stuff, but a lot of it is going to be come down to what you tell yourself in your head on race day. So I'll go back. This is my first Ironman, and this is back when the split running shorts were popular in 1997. So that's Ironman Canada. I think at this point I was probably running just under a 7-minute mile, which is faster than I'd ever trained for a marathon or ever done a marathon. So this was actually a great learning experience for me, and I followed a 6-month training program with a friend of mine, leading up to the race. And I got to the race. I remember I got in the water. I'm like, it's really cold, and I've got a sleeveless wetsuit. My friend said the same thing. So Phil and I headed to the expo, and like, we need to get full sleeve wetsuits. So we ended up getting full sleeve wetsuits, and thankfully Keith, who's the guy from Ironman, was there. Ironman Wetsuits was there, and he said, okay, when you put on your wetsuit, make sure you pull up the sleeves far enough, so you get enough shoulder mobility. And so we went out and practiced, and it was definitely a little bit more restrictive, but ended up being a good decision, even though a risky decision, because it was something we hadn't really trained with, because it kept us warm. Started the race, I think I seated myself pretty well, came out, I think like 104 that year. I didn't really know what to expect, and then got on the bike. And a lot of the races, if you've done a few, they typically start out pretty fast, and you got to be careful. I mean, the old adage, race your own race, is very true. Most people, most athletes, in my observations, start out fast and then fade at the end, both on the bike and the run, especially on a longer race. Like an Ironman, it's even a half. It's hard to gauge, your pace and intensity. You try to get a feel for that in your training, but on race day you may feel a little bit better, or because you're tapered. So you kind of got to keep things in check sometimes and realize, hey, I'm 20 miles in the bike. I don't need to be going 25 miles an hour. because I've been training at 18 or 19. So pace yourself, and I think I did okay on the bike. I did suffer on the second half of the bike course going up Yellow Lake. I remember that distinctly. And then the last, I forget, like 10 miles or so is downhill. So got off the bike. I was excited to get off the bike, and I just like I started flying, and I was like, gosh, I'm just passing people left and right, and looked down at my watch, and I was doing about a 6:30 mile at the start, and I had never done a standalone marathon that fast, and I'd never done any of my long runs that fast. So you probably guess where this is heading. And I remember running out of town, and I'm just passing people, and moved up into maybe to like the top 50 at some point, and I remember someone saying, he's going too fast, and I'm like, I just ignored him, and sure enough, it went downhill from there, and the screws came undone, and ended up slowing down and down and down, and basically gave up all those hard-earned passes as those people passed me later on. So it was a good learning lesson in just pacing and self-control, but it was also, I realized it's really hard to get it right, and you're going to make mistakes. I made a lot of mistakes. I've done 28 Ironmans now, and there's probably maybe a handful that I can say, okay, I've raced that one really well, and the others were, oh, okay, I could have done that better. So it's okay. Biggest advice, just keep it in check, and realize it's a long day, but it is only a day. So back to you. Race morning. This is at Louisville, and as you can tell, it's dark. Um, you want to give yourself enough time because you're gonna have to drop off race bags, body marking, and then bathroom, and no matter how many portable toilets they put there, there's always going to be a line. So you want to give yourself enough time, and you it's one of those things. It's there's bathrooms at the changing tents too, so you can always hit them after the swim, after the bike, and they typically have them at the aid station as well. But definitely in the morning, you want to do what you need to get done. A lot of with these races, like at Louisville, we had to check in the bikes the day before. So the morning of, you want to give yourself time to go to your bike, make sure you have enough air in your tires. Overnight they may have lost a little bit of air. Check, make sure your brakes aren't rubbing. So you can do all those checks. They're not going to let you take your bike out of transition area to ride it. So your warm up, my warm ups typically on race morning is I would just run a little bit in the morning, and then if I could, try and get in the water 15 minutes or so early just to get wet and to swim a little bit to get warmed up. You don't need to do a huge warm up because you're going to be doing a long day anyways, but it helps to get your muscles moving and get the blood flow up a little bit. So when you start the race, your body can handle that transition.
I have a friend that she's a phenomenal athlete, and what she started doing, because she found that she didn't ever have quite enough time race morning, no matter how early she would get there, she would do her warm up first thing when she woke up. So, whether that's 15, 20-minute easy run with some pickups, just to get your blood flow and your heart going for the day, she'd get that done first thing, and then have her breakfast, focus on the race, and because it's Ironman distance racing, you don't quite have to do that warm up as close to the race as you would some maybe shorter events, because they're a little bit faster intensity right at the start.
Yeah. So we talked about some of these things, but here's a close up on the left. This is at Chesapeake Mand a few years back, and this is the it's now this year's Ironman Maryland, but you can see some rows of bags hanging. So each of those are numbered, and I think the green was the bike bags, and the orange was the run bags. But typically, if I was coming out of the swim, I'd grab and this is actually me coming out for the run. So I would have finished the bike, grabbed my bag, run into the changing tent, put on my run gear, and then headed out on the run like I'm doing. On the right side, this is another Ironman race. You can see sometimes they'll lay out the bags in rows, and they should be in order, and the back of these signs would be their numbers. You can see that yellow sign. It looks like it says 2351 to 2400, so groups of 50. So it's good when you drop off your gear in the morning. You'll typically drop it off, and it will be put in order, or you'll put in order. So it's a good idea to, when you drop it off, to pay attention where you drop it off, so you know what row to run down, and you can quickly, and approximately where it is, so you can more quickly grab your bag. And you notice these are, looks like most of them are cinched. It's a good idea. Maybe do a slip knot at the top so your stuff doesn't get dumped out. In some cases, you'll drop off your, typically I see this with run gear, you'll drop it off at a truck and they'll take it to some other location and set it up for you. In that case, you definitely want to, at least cinch up your bag, or, do a slip knot or something so that, it doesn't dump all over the place. Um, this was Coeur d'Alene, so if you can, pretty big lake, but I forget the number of people. I want to say it was like 2,400 that year. A lot of people. Depending on the race, most of them will have in-water starts, and as you can see, there's still a lot of people. Um, I should take that back. I think it might have been a beach start, either an in-water or beach start. I know Lake Placid's in-water, but it doesn't mean you have to start right in the water. You can start in the back, so you can see there's some folks in the back. If you look up at the, sort of the middle of the screen, looks like a washing machine. So you can see a lot of chop and farms being thrashed. So it's really important, to get an idea of, you can look at past results to get an idea of where people are finishing. If you're, under an hour swimmer, then definitely you could be up towards the front. If you're down under 50 minutes, you're going to be probably in the very front. I typically swim just under an hour, so I would maybe start near the front, but a couple rows back. For someone that's maybe expects to finish an hour and a half, maybe you start, up on shore, wait for the gun to go off, and then, get in. So, get an idea for where you think you'll finish based on your training or other races you've done, as well as, the times on the course and where you expect to be. Typically in the back or the side, you're going to have less of this melee. If you're right in the middle, it's probably the worst. This is actually a pretty good venue because it's a big lake, so it spreads out a little bit more. Contrast that with Lake Placid. Mirror Lake is pretty small, so everybody kind of converges into a narrower area. So just to keep in mind. And you can see the buoys in the background lightly, so they're yellow. Hopefully you've the morning of, or the day before, you've kind of got a feel for where they are to get an idea. I always find it, if you can, to count how many there are. If I say, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, say there's 5 yellows before the turnaround, just to get an idea, so I can kind of keep track when I'm swimming. And generally speaking, unless you're leading the swim, you can just follow the swimmer ahead of you. One thing I've learned is most people don't sight very straight, and so if you try and follow somebody, if you get a good pair of feet and they swim straight, stick with them. But if they are zigzagging a lot, sometimes you have to just kind of, sight on your own. Follow your plan. So he talked about having sort of an overall training plan. I think it helps to also have a race day plan. And if you've gone through the course, you can kind of think about it as we've probably all done race reports or kind of race summaries. Think about it as a pre-race write-up. And what I would tell my clients is, write your race plan as if it was a race report and you had your ideal race. So what happened? Where did you start? How did you feel on the swim? How did did you felt calm and relaxed? You sighted the buoys. Um, Visualize. What do you need to transition? From the swim to the bike. Nice thing about a lot of these bigger races, they'll have wetsuit strippers, so you have someone that actually helps you with your wetsuit. So have that in your plan. Say, okay, I'm going to have get someone help me with the wetsuit. I'm going to get on the bike. I'm gonna, if you're using power, maybe you say, okay, I'm gonna stay at 160 or 180 watts, whatever it is, or, I'm gonna just maintain this moderately hard effort or moderate effort, and I'm gonna get water from the aid stations and maybe sports drink every other aid station. So have that sort of mapped out ahead of time. And I think it always helps to write it down. And so it gives you confidence because you kind of say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. Same thing with the run, don't do what I do and just start out flying, pace yourself and say, okay, other people may start out flying, but I'm just going to start out and I'll stay strong throughout.
Yeah, and you can visualize yourself actually going through each part of the race on that particular race course, especially if you've done it before or have some idea of what the course is like. So from start to finish, going through transition, sort of just see yourself doing it all, like David said, finishing it. And it's a lot easier to do it on race day if you've done it in your head. So that's one of the things I do a lot, especially for long distance races. But I have my athletes practice sort of visually going through it and finishing it. And it's a great technique because psychologically you feel like you've already done the race. So when you go to do it, you're just sort of following that map in your head.
So one of the things, the first quote I showed to you about, you're learning to compete against yourself, and it's when I think about I've done a bunch of Ironmans now, but even if I think about the whole thing all at once, I'm like, oh my God, it's just overwhelming. So one of the most important things you can do is it's really to break it into small pieces, and this can apply to anything in life really. Um, and by that I mean, so I'm going to do it. I've got a 2.4 mile swim, 112-mile bike, full marathon run, or if you're doing a half, half the distance. I just got to get to the swim start. And then okay, the gun goes off. Let me get settle into a rhythm, and then I got to get to the first buoy, and then let me get to the second buoy. So rather than try and visualize, take on the whole thing at once, say, okay, I'm just going to get to that next milestone. I'm going to finish the swim. Okay, let me just get through transition and start the bike, and let me just get to that 5 mile marker. Let me get to that first aid station. Same thing with the run. Let me get to the next aid station. And so it's a way to help you stay present and more focused on the now. Second thing, let the stuff go. So things are going to happen. In your mind, you're going to start playing tricks on yourself. The best you can do is just to kind of let it go as much as you can. And this is, something you should practice in training too. I know when I was out racing and I just get stuck on, gosh, I had a crappy transition, and then I hold on to that for half the run. I'm like, this is, no, it doesn't matter anymore. It's past. Let it go. The planning. The nice thing about planning is it kind of gives you that confidence. So if I have that picture in my head of this is what the race is going to like, and I've driven the bike course, and I've maybe ridden or driven the run course, I kind of know what to expect, and it'll give you. I think that really will help with confidence and have fun. And at the end of the day, even if you're trying to make a living at it, I look at a lot of the pros here at our Spruce Confections, our local coffee shop this morning, and a few of the pros, see, gosh, I can't remember his name. Tyler Butterfield was there, and a couple of the other guys, and Tyler was, I think, 5th at Hawaii last year. And I'm just like, they're just hanging out, they're having coffee, they seem to be enjoying themselves, and I'm like, gosh, I guess they have to enjoy it if they're doing so much of it. So remember that, you paid for it, you signed up for it, so just make the most of it. Stuff's gonna happen. When I did Lake Placid the first year, that's not me, but that could have been me on the side of the road. I had two flats and only one spare, so it wasn't a great experience, and ended up not having a very fast time. But I was like, okay, I can't do anything about it. I just got to fix the flat and take a deep breath, fix it, and move on. And it's funny. As Krista mentioned, I've had some success in the Ironman distance, and I've Vineman in Santa Rosa is one of my favorite races. And in 2007, or can't actually, it wasn't. It was before 2007. Can't remember maybe 2000. It must have been 2001. I remember, a couple guys ahead of me on the bike, and I caught them. So I caught the leaders right at the base of this long climb, and I passed them. So I was in the lead, and right as I got to the top of the long climb, I flatted. I heard, and I'm like, crap. Sure enough, it's my back wheel too. So I have to, change that. So I got off. Watched the guys go by me, and they're like, oh, sorry, or do you need anything? I'm like, no, no. And so I fixed it, probably lost 6 or 7 minutes, got back on the bike, and it was a mental game for me at that point, because I'm like, I was frustrated that, I had the lead and gave it up, and, I couldn't catch the guys. It was only about 10 miles to go, so I couldn't catch the guys before the run. So I got on the run. I'm like, I'm just going to, not worry about it, just do my best, and ran and ran, and ended up catching them all, and they caught the last guy probably about 2 miles before the finish. So it ended up being a great race in spite of that mishap. So stuff's gonna happen. Your goggles might get knocked off. You get a flat, but it's not to say you can't still pull it back together. And finally, I would say don't forget the sunscreen. You typically when you put on, you want to put it on in the morning. Wait till after you get body mark so that the marker stays on better. Um, a lot of times I'll have it in the changing tents. If not, maybe throw a tube in there. Especially for longer races, more, because if you're doing a full, if you're starting at 7, you're on the bike for 5, 6, 7 hours during the middle of the day, and you start the run in the middle of the day. So it's very easy to get sunburned, and it can be really uncomfortable. The other thing, to think about is chafing. I've always had issues with chafing in the groin and under the arms. Body Glide works great. Definitely use a lot of that. So I mentioned the shoes. I'm a big fan of putting on shoes in the changing tent and not leaving them on the bike, because I've watched so many people run barefooted, hop on their bike, and basically ride off the side of the road as they try and put their feet into their shoes, which are already clipped on. Carry a spare tube and CO2 cartridges. Most of these races are going to have good bike support, but when I did Vineman that year, or maybe in the next year, running with he's actually Brandon, but he lives in Boulder now, and ended up running with him. But I was on my first loop of the 3-loop run, and he was on a second, because he had flatted on the bike and he had to wait about an hour. So he would have been a contender for winning the race that year, but he had to wait. So carry that spare tube, or if you're using tubulars, carry that spare tire. Carry some fluids and nutrition. I mean, there are aid stations. When you get to them, it took me a few tries to learn this, but you have to slow down. So you can't take a bottle at full speed, because all you're going to do is knock it out of the volunteer's hand. I mean, they're going to typically hand it out to you. You want to slow down on the bike, grab it. What I like to do is, as I approach the aid station, is they'll have typically trash cans set up with signs like, throw empties here. Sometimes they'll even have them after the aid stations too. So as I approach the aid station, usually there's signs that'll say aid station ahead. I'll get my empties ready to dump, and I'll toss them. And then as I come into the aid station, slow down, grab what I need. If you look at the athlete guide, most times they'll tell you the order that things are in. So for example, it may say water, sports drink, gel, water again, sports drink, bananas, something like that. So if you have an idea, and if they're the same from aid station to aid station, you kind of plan ahead for what you need to grab. I always think it's good to start with something on the bike because, for whatever reason, you may miss a handoff, and then I'd rather keep going than have to turn around. Or it's always good to have a little bit, because you could say, well, I was only planning on drinking one bottle of sports drink, but I'm getting lightheaded, so I need that extra calories. So it's good to have it there. And then finally, dress appropriately. So Vineman, this picture's from Vineman. It starts out cool in the morning in the 50s. You may need arm warmers at the start of the bike. By midday, maybe it's warm, you don't need them. The run, when are you going to finish? Do you need covering for your shoulders? Do you need maybe a lighter jacket in your special needs bag if you're going to finish at night when it's cooler? So look ahead to the weather, what the expected temperatures are going to be, and plan ahead accordingly. Now, go achieve your success.
Yeah, and just remember, don't freak out if you do forget something. I'll never forget my first Ironman in Hawaii. I showed up, and that morning I forgot all my nutrition bottles. So what I did is just sort of adapt and use what's on the course, even though you're not supposed to do that on race day. But when you get in these situations, you just do the best you can, and and sort of make those adaptations. Everything happens. I mean, things happen to almost everybody, and the best athletes learn how to, sort of how to adapt to things like that.
Yep. And Tim had a great question. Do you recommend spare tubes and cartridge in the bike special needs bag? It doesn't hurt. And I think if you have a set on your bike, I always anticipate having one flat, and usually don't flat at all. And unfortunately, every once in a while, you get that double flat for whatever reason. I don't know if I necessarily recommend it, but it doesn't hurt. And the only thing, may become a cost issue if you're riding tubulars and you're not sure if you're going to get your special needs bag back. But if it's just a tube and a CO2 cartridge, we're talking $10-12. It may be worth having it there, for that peace of mind and just in case. So definitely take additional questions. Please ask them through the chat window. You can, on the meeting dashboard, if you click on the little triangle next to chat, it'll open up the window. Again, we'll post a recording at schooltry.com in the library. Definitely, if you haven't seen that, check it out. We've done a number of webinars over the years on race nutrition, just general nutrition training, most recently on strength training, a bunch of topics. Each, we do repeat some of them, but we end up redoing the presentation anyway. So they're hopefully each year they get better and better. In 2 weeks, so the Tuesday the 20th, actually doing a webinar with 6-time Ironman world champion Dave Scott, called Set Yourself Up for Success on Race Day. So we'll touch on some of the same things that Krista and I talked about tonight, but we'll kind of go into it from Dave's perspective. And if you don't know Dave, he's one of the icons of the sport. He's inducted into the USA Triathlon Hall of Fame. He's one of only 2 men, him and Mark Allen, have won the Ironman 6 times. And he's also a coach. He's coached Chrissy Wellington, who's never finished second in Ironman. So she's won every one she's done. She's currently the Ironman world record holder for time. He's worked with Craig Alexander, who's a multiple Ironman Hawaii winner, and last year he worked with he's Rachel Joyce's coach. He finished second at Kona. So tremendous resource, and I think he charges, at least a couple years ago, he was charging like $300 an hour for a consult. So it's really his time is it's well worth it, and this is through Training Peaks. So there's no cost to attend, and you can. I've got details on it at schooltry.com. Please contact us with any questions. We'll stay on the line for a few more minutes. but you can also feel free to email us as well. And I will, once I get the recording edited, I'll put it up on YouTube and up on schooltry.com, and I will send you all a link to the both the online presentation as well as a PDF version of the presentation and the recording as well. So please, if you have any questions about racing or I'd love to hear them, or we'd love to hear them. Okay, it looks like we're not getting any questions right now. So thank you again for your time, and again, please email us and check out schooltry.com when you get a chance. And have a good night. One question: any first-time advice for Ironman Lake Placid? Yeah, and I mean the big thing with Placid, two-loop course, bike and run. So pre-drive the course so you become familiar with it. The transition areas in the Olympic speed or skating arena, or I guess arena is the right word. So just to kind of become familiar with it. The swim, the challenge there, it's sort of a pretty narrow lake. There's if you get a chance to do the practice swim, there's actually cables that run the duration of the lake. So if you get close to the cables, you can actually shut off the cables and not even have to look up because they run basically the length of the course. 2 loops of the swim. The big thing there is just going to be really get used to the idea that it's going to be really crowded at the start, and so a lot of jostling. One of the things you can do to practice open water swimming is get 5 or 6 of your buddies and jump in one lane of the pool and just practice swimming down, being close and bumping into each other, and getting used to swimming over somebody or having someone swim over you. The nice thing about that lake, it's cool enough that you can wear a wetsuit and or should be able to wear a wetsuit. So that that they sort of, I always look at wetsuits as body armor too. Steve asks, 70.3 Syracuse in June and Lake Placid in July. I have a 5-hour ride in the training plan, a weekend at Syracuse, so I try and make up that training session. Yeah, I mean, I would, if you could fit it in, probably, I mean, you could do it as soon as a week after if you feel good, but I would try and throw it in maybe 2 weeks after, depending on what your schedule says, or if you get it in midweek, maybe a little over a week after. Do you have any general guidelines? Mike asked a question. Do you have any general guidelines for racing prior to a race? How often? How close? Yeah, this is. If you send me an email afterwards, I can send you some general guidelines. For an Ironman, I like to recommend doing a half like 5 to 8 weeks before. You can do, I've had good success and I've seen other people have good success with doing a sprinter international 1 or 2 weeks before an Ironman. So sort of that you're tapering anyways and sort of get the high intensity training. As a general rule of thumb, I like to race no more than once a month because I think it does take away from the training. And then, if your goal is that key race, everything kind of builds up to that. So, early in the season, do some shorter races, progress to a half and then up to a full. Or if you're doing a half, start with a sprint Olympic full. I got one more question, and then I actually got to run to a meeting. Tanner asked, any special comments, suggestions for relay teams? Yeah, I think the big thing with relays is, you're obviously going to be, training for each event, so you can, typically go a little bit harder in each one. Just pay attention to the directions for the handoff. A lot of times you have to hand off at the transition spot. So or that may be different. You have one timing chip that you'll share, then you'll pass it to the next person. So just have an idea of where that's going to be, and I know. I remember a Vineman one year. There was a team. They were trying to like shadow the course, and the biker, rather than stop at the dismount line, just like rode straight into the transition area to get to the spot, and ended up being a dangerous situation. I think they ended up disqualifying for him, for doing that. So just be aware of what the rules are, and and obviously do the training in whatever leg or legs that you plan to do. So I apologize, I've got to run, but feel free to email either of us, and we'll get back to you, and hopefully we can answer your questions, or at least give you another resource. So thanks, and have a good night.